I still wake up in a cold sweat sometimes, reliving the moment my own parents, the two people who were supposed to love and protect me unconditionally, signed the papers that sent me away to a place that felt more like a prison than a path to help. They told me it was for my own good, that I was a problem, a disappointment, but the truth is, they just couldn't handle the consequences of their own choices, and I was the easiest scapegoat. I was 17, practically an adult, and they stripped me of my freedom, my dignity, and nearly my sanity, all because I dared to have a life outside of their carefully constructed box. Was I wrong for wanting to escape the suffocating grip of their expectations? Tell me, truly, would you have done anything differently if your entire world was crumbling around you? Engineered by the very people who brought you into it. It all started subtly, like a slow poison seeping into the foundations of our seemingly perfect suburban life. My parents, particularly my mother, had always been obsessed with appearances. We lived in a beautiful house, had 2 cars, went on annual vacations, and I was expected to be the perfect son. Excellent grades, polite, destined for an Ivy League school. From a young age, my life was meticulously planned. Every extracurricular, every tutor, every summer camp was chosen with the singular goal of making me a success. I played piano, joined the debate team, volunteered at the local animal shelter. Not because I enjoyed these things, but because they looked good on a college application. My father, while less outwardly controlling than my mother, was equally complicit, a quiet enforcer of her will, always deferring to her better judgment. He was a man of few words, but his silence often spoke volumes, conveying his disappointment or approval without him having to utter a single syllable. I remember one time, when I was about 15, I brought home a B in chemistry. My mother's face twisted into a mask of disbelief, her voice a sharp whisper as she asked, "What happened, son? Is this really the best you can do?" My father just sat at the dining table, meticulously buttering his toast, not looking at me. And that silence was more crushing than any lecture. My only real escape, my sanctuary, was my music. I discovered electric guitar around 14, and it was the first thing that ever truly felt like mine. I poured all my frustration, my unheard thoughts, my burgeoning rebellious spirit into learning riffs and chords. My parents tolerated it, seeing it as a temporary hobby, something I'd eventually outgrow for more productive pursuits. They even bought me a decent guitar and amp, probably thinking it would keep me busy and out of trouble. But they didn't realize that music was brewing a storm within me, a desire for authenticity that was completely at odds with their manufactured reality. I started going to local open mic nights, eventually forming a small band with a few friends from school. We weren't great, not yet, but the feeling of being on stage, playing our own songs, connecting with an audience, it was exhilarating. It was freedom. My grades, predictably, started to slip. Not dramatically, but enough to trigger alarm bells in my parents' finely tuned radar. The B in chemistry became a C+, and then eventually, a D. The constant pressure, the endless studying for subjects I hated, combined with the pure joy I found in music, created an internal tug-of-war that I was slowly losing. I was exhausted, stressed, and profoundly unhappy. The first major confrontation came after a particularly late band practice. I snuck back in around 2 a.m., thinking I was being quiet, but my mother was waiting for me in the living room, a ghost in the dim light. Her face was grim, her eyes narrowed. "Where have you been, young man? Do you know what time it is?" she demanded, her voice low and dangerous. I mumbled something about a friend's house, a lie that was transparent even to me. She didn't buy it. She started asking pointed questions about my friends, about what we were really doing. I tried to defend myself, to explain how much music meant to me, how I was actually happier than I'd ever been. But she just shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Happy? You're failing classes, you're disrespecting this family, and you're throwing away your future for some foolish hobby. We didn't sacrifice everything for you to become a musician." The word musician was spat out like an insult. My father emerged from the bedroom, drawn by the raised voices. He took one look at my mother's furious face and my defiant stance, and simply sighed, running a hand over his thinning hair. "We need to talk about this in the morning," he said, his voice flat, a pronouncement of doom. The talk turned into an inquisition. They sat me down side by side, like prosecuting attorneys. They presented a meticulously compiled dossier of my failings. My slipping grades, the late nights, the unsuitable friends they'd clearly been investigating. They talked about my attitude problem, my lack of gratitude, and how I was wasting my potential. I tried to argue, to explain that I was miserable living the life they had planned for me, that I needed something more, something authentic. I even pleaded with them, tears welling up in my eyes, telling them how much I hated the pressure, how much I dreaded school. My mother scoffed. Hate school? That's what children say. You need to grow up, take responsibility. We are giving you every opportunity, and you are spitting in our faces. My father, for once, spoke more directly. Son, we just want what's best for you. This music thing, it's not a career. It's a pipe dream. You need to focus on your studies, get into a good college, and build a stable future. Their words felt like walls closing in, suffocating me. The next few months were a blur of escalating conflict. They grounded me, took away my guitar, restricted my internet access, and even started monitoring my phone. Every conversation felt like an interrogation. I started sneaking out more often, desperate for any glimpse of the life I wanted. I'd meet my bandmates in secret, practicing in abandoned garages, feeling like a criminal just for pursuing my passion. The lies piled up, creating a chasm between us that seemed impossible to bridge. I felt trapped, misunderstood, and utterly alone. My parents, meanwhile, became convinced I was on a dangerous path, that I was spiraling out of control. They saw my rebellion not as a cry for help or autonomy, but as a deliberate act of defiance, a personal attack on their authority and their vision for my future. They talked about tough love, about interventions. I overheard snippets of their conversations, hushed whispers about specialized programs and behavior modification. The words sent a chill down my spine. I knew deep down that something truly terrible was coming. One evening, after another explosive argument about my future, or lack thereof according to them, I returned to my room to find my guitar missing. Not just put away, but gone. I confronted them, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. Where is it? What did you do with my guitar? My mother looked at me with cold, unwavering eyes. It's been donated. You clearly can't handle the responsibility of having it. Until you prove you can focus on what's important, you won't be needing it. My father stood beside her, his arms crossed, his face expressionless. It was a calculated act of cruelty, meant to break my spirit. It nearly did. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated hatred for them, for their inability to see me, to understand me, to love me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. That night, something inside me snapped. I packed a small bag, mostly clothes, and slipped out of the house, determined to never come back. I spent a few nights couch surfing at friends' houses, but word eventually got back to my parents. They sent out a frantic search party, calling the police, painting me as a troubled runaway. They found me at my bandmate's house, after a tense call from his parents who were clearly worried about the legal implications. When my parents arrived with 2 police officers, the scene was surreal. My mother was tearful, putting on a show of distress, while my father looked stern and unforgiving. They hugged me, but it felt hollow, performative. They promised things would be different, that we would talk, that they would listen. I, foolishly, wanted to believe them. I went home, cautiously optimistic, hoping that my desperate act of running away had finally opened their eyes. For a few days, things seemed calmer. They were less confrontational, almost gentle. They asked about my feelings, about what I wanted. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could find a middle ground. I even started to tell them about my dreams for a career in music, how I was researching music schools and performance opportunities. They listened, nodding, but their eyes held a strange, calculating glint I couldn't quite decipher. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. I was 17, on the verge of what I thought was a reconciliation with my parents, believing they were finally listening to me, finally seeing me. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have trusted them? Would you have held on to the hope that things could change? Or would you have been more wary, recognizing the subtle signs of manipulation that I was too desperate to see? Think about it and let me know. The morning of my 18th birthday was supposed to be a celebration, a turning point. Instead, it became the day my world shattered. I woke up to a knock on my door, expecting my parents with a cake or presents. Instead, there were two large, imposing men in plain clothes standing in my room, their faces unsmiling. My parents were behind them, my mother's eyes red-rimmed, my father's jaw set firm. "Son," my father began, his voice devoid of emotion, "we've made a decision. This isn't working. You need help." Before I could even process what was happening, the two men were moving towards me. They grabbed my arms, their grip firm and unyielding. I struggled, yelling, demanding to know what was going on. My mother choked back a sob, turning her face away, while my father simply watched, his gaze like stone. "You're going to a special school," he said, as if explaining a trip to the dentist. "It's a therapeutic boarding school. They're going to help you get back on track." It wasn't a school. It was a boot camp. A place designed to break you down and rebuild you according to a specific, rigid mold. It was located deep in a rural area, miles from anything, isolated and inescapable. The first few days were a blur of shock and humiliation. They confiscated my phone, all my personal belongings, even the few books I'd managed to grab. My clothes were replaced with a uniform, scratchy and ill-fitting. The days were structured with military precision. Early morning wake-up calls, grueling physical exercises, monotonous chores and endless therapy sessions that felt more like interrogations. We were not allowed to speak without permission, to look at each other, or to express any individuality. Any deviation from the rules was met with swift and severe punishment. Extra chores, isolation, or public shaming. The staff, all ex-military types, were stern and humorless, their faces set in permanent scowls. They told us we were troubled, defiant, disrespectful. That our parents loved us so much they had to send us there to save us. I tried to fight it, to argue my case, to explain that I wasn't a criminal, just a kid who wanted to play music. But my words fell on deaf ears. They saw my defiance as further proof of my bad attitude, my resistance to change. They had 1,000 manipulative tactics to wear us down. Sleep deprivation, emotional abuse disguised as confrontational therapy, the constant erosion of our sense of self. They forced us to write reflection essays about our wrongdoings, to call our parents once a week and apologize for everything, to express gratitude for being rescued. I remember one call, my voice cracking as I read from a script they'd given me, apologizing for running away, for my poor choices, for hurting my parents. My mother's voice on the other end was full of saccharine relief. "Oh, my sweet boy, we just want you to be happy and healthy. We knew this was the right thing." It made my stomach churn. I felt like an actor in a cruel play, forced to perform for my captors and my oblivious audience. Months dragged by, each day blurring into the next. I saw kids break down, their spirits crushed, their individuality erased. Some embraced the program, becoming model residents, their eyes empty but compliant. Others, like me, held on to a sliver of hope, a flicker of defiance, hiding it deep within. I learned to play the game, to say the right things, to pretend to conform, all while planning my escape, not just physically but emotionally. I began to understand that my parents hadn't sent me there out of love, but out of fear and a desperate need to control their narrative. They couldn't face the judgment of their peers if their perfect son deviated from the path they had laid out. I was a stain on their impeccable facade, and the boot camp was their way of bleaching me clean. The day I finally turned 18, while still at the boot camp, was anticlimactic. No celebration, just another day of drills and chores. But something shifted in me. I was legally an adult. They couldn't force me to stay anymore. I approached one of the few staff members who seemed to possess a shred of humanity, a counselor named Sarah. I calmly and firmly explained that I was 18, and I wanted to leave. She looked at me with a flicker of sympathy, something rare in that place. She informed my parents, who predictably tried to fight it. They argued that I was still unstable, that I needed more time. But the law was on my side. After a tense few weeks of legal back and forth, with me refusing to sign anything that would keep me there voluntarily, They had no choice. I was released. The moment I walked out of that gate, feeling the sun on my face, I was a different person. I didn't go home. I couldn't. I had nowhere to go, no money, no real plan. But I had my freedom. I called the one friend who had stayed in touch, discreetly, through a contraband phone I'd managed to acquire and hide during my last weeks there. He helped me find a place to stay, a tiny room in a shared apartment. I got a minimum wage job, washing dishes, saving every penny. It was hard, lonely, and terrifying, but it was my life. I started reconnecting with my music, borrowing a beat-up guitar, playing whenever I could. It was my therapy, my anchor. I enrolled in community college, taking evening classes, slowly rebuilding my education on my own terms. My parents tried to contact me, sending angry texts and emails, demanding I come home, threatening to cut me off financially. They couldn't understand why I wouldn't just fall back into their perfect little life. I responded once, calmly, telling them that I loved them, but I couldn't live under their control anymore. I explained the trauma of the boot camp, the feeling of betrayal, how it had shattered my trust. They dismissed it, calling me dramatic, saying I was ungrateful. I realized then that they would never truly understand. They were too deeply entrenched in their own version of reality. It's been years now. I'm a professional musician, playing gigs, writing my own music, touring with a band. It wasn't an easy path, not by any stretch. There were countless nights of doubt, of struggle, of wondering if I'd made the right choice. But every time I step on stage, every time I hear the crowd cheer, I know I did. I have a relationship with my parents now, but it's distant, carefully maintained. We talk, we exchange pleasantries, but the trust is gone, irrevocably broken. They still hint occasionally that if I had just behaved, if I had just gone to the Ivy League, my life would be easier, more stable. But ease and stability aren't the same as fulfillment. And I learned the hard way that the most important thing is to be true to yourself, no matter the cost. My story is a testament to the fact that even when the people who are supposed to protect you become the ones who try to imprison you, you have the power to break free. So that's my story. A journey through a personal hell, orchestrated by the very people who were supposed to be my saviors. I hope it resonated with some of you, or at least made you think about the hidden struggles people face, even within seemingly perfect families. If you were on my side, if you understood my fight for freedom, please like this video. Subscribe for more stories like this, raw and unfiltered. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. What would you have done? Have you ever felt trapped by someone else's expectations? I'll see you all in the next story.